In 1879, doctors gathered around a woman who should have been dead. Her heart barely beat once every few minutes. Her skin refused to decay, and when they tried to declare her gone, she opened her eyes. The church called her possessed. Scientists called her impossible. But more than a century later, new research has uncovered the truth about what she really was. And it's more horrifying than anything the Victorians could have imagined. This is one of the strangest unsolved medical mysteries in history. A case buried for over 140 years, recently uncovered by modern science. Stay till the end, because the truth they found will change everything you thought you knew about life and death. Before we uncover what really happened in 1879, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this story, because what you're about to hear, most people still don't believe is real. The Woman Who Wouldn't Die, London, 1879. A city of fog, horse hooves, and secrets buried under gaslight. But that winter, one woman's name began to spread through the streets like wildfire. Eliza Merriweather, a 27-year-old seamstress from the East End. Ordinary, quiet, until the night she didn't die. It began just after midnight. A carriage stopped outside St. Bartholomew's Hospital. The driver looked terrified. In the back seat lay Eliza, pale, motionless, her skin as cold as stone. He swore she hadn't breathed for hours. Doctors rushed in. One of them, Dr. Henry Wilcox, leaned down to check her pulse. Nothing. He moved to close her eyes. But then, something impossible happened. Her fingers moved, just slightly. Like a twitch, everyone froze. One nurse dropped her instruments, and Wilcox whispered, "Prepare the examination room, but don't record her as deceased." For hours they examined her. No heartbeat, no breathing, no warmth. By every rule of medicine, she was dead. But her pupils still reacted to light, and under her eyelids, the faintest flicker, like her eyes were moving. Nurses started whispering prayers. One said, "She's caught between worlds." Another refused to touch her again. Wilcox tried to stay calm. "Science explains all," he said. But that night, science didn't explain anything. At dawn, they moved her to cold storage, a holding room for the dead before burial. And that's when it happened again. As the attendants lifted her, her lips parted, just enough to draw in a breath. A sound escaped her throat, not a scream, not a gasp, just breath. Everyone panicked. When Wilcox ran in, she was still again, completely still. But now, there was something new. A pulse. Weak, irregular, but there he couldn't explain it. None of them could. He began documenting every detail, convinced he'd discovered something unheard of, a human being suspended between life and death. For 2 nights, he kept her under observation, and every night the same chilling thing. Her body moved, slightly, her fingers curled, her lips trembled, a faint breath escaped, as if something deep inside her refused to let go. Then, on the 3rd night, Dr. Wilcox wrote something that would never leave his mind. At precisely 2:17 a.m., the subject turned her head toward me. Her eyes remained closed. Her lips moved, forming a single word. "Cold." He dropped his pen. She wasn't supposed to be able to speak. By the end of the week, her condition grew stranger. Her skin, once soft, turned porcelain-like, smooth and unnaturally pale. Her veins darkened under the surface, like ink spreading through glass. A decomposition that wasn't decomposition at all. When word got out, London went mad. Newspapers called her the Woman Who Wouldn't Die. Crowds gathered outside the hospital gates, praying, shouting, demanding to see her. Some said she was a miracle. Others said she was cursed. But what the world didn't know, what the doctors never told the press, was what happened on the 7th night. Because as Dr. Wilcox leaned over her bed to check her pulse one last time, Eliza Merriweather's eyes snapped open, and she was staring right at him. The awakening Eliza Merriweather's eyes were open, but not like before. Not fluttering, not twitching, open, wide and cold, like she'd been watching him the whole time. Dr. Wilcox froze. For several seconds, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of his pocket watch. Her pupils were enormous, swallowing the color from her eyes, and then, with a slow inhale, her chest began to rise. "She's breathing," whispered the nurse. But it didn't sound like breathing. It sounded wrong, like air being pulled through something hollow. "Eliza," Wilcox said softly. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. Then her lips moved, dry, cracked, and a whisper escaped. "Cold," the same word from before. He leaned closer. "Do you know where you are?" She blinked once, slowly, then again, and then her hand, stiff, trembling, reached out and grabbed his wrist. Everyone in the room gasped. Her grip was ice, and when she finally spoke again, her voice was faint, but every syllable burned into his memory. "They're waiting." "Beneath," Wilcox pulled back in shock. "Who's waiting, Eliza, who?" But her eyes rolled back, and she fell still once more, as if the effort of speaking had drained what little life she had left. From that moment on, Dr. Wilcox stopped calling her a patient. In his notes, she became Subject M. Over the next 3 nights, he and his team documented every change. Her heartbeat came and went at irregular intervals, sometimes strong, sometimes undetectable. Her body temperature dropped below freezing, yet she showed no signs of frostbite. And her brain activity, measured crudely by primitive instruments, spiked wildly during the hours between 2 and 3 a.m. Each night, she whispered more words, disjointed fragments, under cold light. "Don't let him." Wilcox couldn't piece them together, but something in her tone chilled him. The nurses refused to enter the room anymore. One claimed she saw Eliza's reflection blink a second later than her real body. Another swore the patient's eyes followed her, even when closed. By the 5th night, Wilcox was unraveling. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating. He became obsessed with her condition, with proving it could be explained by science. Then came the night everything changed. Wilcox sat beside her bed, reading over his notes. He heard the sound first, a faint tapping, like nails on wood. He looked down. Eliza's hand was moving, tapping the bed frame, slowly, rhythmically. Tap, tap, tap. When he leaned in to listen, she turned her head and whispered, "Don't." "Open it," Wilcox's heart raced. "Open what?" But she didn't answer. Instead, her eyes shifted toward the corner of the room, toward the old storage cabinet no one had touched in years. He approached it slowly, lantern trembling in his hand. Inside were medical records, old instruments, and a leather-bound book covered in dust. The name on the spine stopped him cold. Dr. Erasmus Vale, a name that hadn't been spoken in the hospital for decades. A doctor once expelled for unnatural experiments. Wilcox stared at the book, and for the first time he began to wonder, was Eliza really a miracle, or the result of something far darker? The experiments, doctor. Henry Wilcox didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in his office, staring at the dust-covered journal of a man long erased from medical history, Dr. Erasmus Vale. Vale had once been one of London's most respected researchers, until 1864, when every record of his work was suddenly sealed by order of the Crown. Rumours said he'd tried to stop death itself. Others said his final experiment had killed 13 people. Wilcox opened the first page. The handwriting was neat, clinical, and terrifying. If the soul departs with the body, then perhaps the body must be persuaded not to let it go. Page after page, Vale described a series of preservations. Test subjects injected with a serum made of mercury compounds, blood extracts, and something labeled only as compound V13. The purpose: to keep the human body suspended between life and decay. Wilcox read until his hands trembled, because the symptoms Vale listed were identical to Eliza Merriweather's: lack of heartbeat, yet cellular integrity preserved. Speech returns in fragments. Subject expresses fear of cold. Eliza wasn't a miracle. She was a continuation of Vale's forbidden experiment. But how? Vale's work had ended years before Eliza was even born. The answer came near the final pages of the journal. A chilling note written in darker ink. The compound may persist through inheritance if administered to a pregnant host. Wilcox slammed the book shut. Could Eliza's mother have been one of Vale's patients? He had to know. The next day he travelled to the East End, to the narrow building where Eliza had lived. Her landlady, a frail old woman, trembled when she heard his name. "You're the doctor, aren't you? The one who won't let her rest?" Wilcox pressed on. "Tell me about her mother." The woman's face went pale. "Her mother died in childbirth. Same as Eliza nearly did. Dr. Vale delivered the baby himself." Wilcox felt his blood run cold. It wasn't coincidence. Eliza was Vale's legacy. Back at the hospital that evening, he returned to her room and found something even stranger. Eliza was awake, sitting upright, eyes open but distant, like a doll someone had forgotten to wind. He approached carefully. "Eliza, can you hear me?" She turned her head ever so slowly. "He never stopped," she whispered. Wilcox's breath caught. "Who, Eliza?" "Who never stopped?" "Doctor Vale." The candle beside her flickered, though no window was open. Then, as if pulled by an unseen force, the journal on Wilcox's desk slid open by itself, to a page marked with a crimson stain. It read, "The 13th subject awoke. It calls to me still." Wilcox stumbled back. There were only 12 names listed before Eliza's. That meant she was the 13th. That night, Wilcox gathered 2 fellow physicians, men he trusted, and revealed everything. They thought he'd lost his mind until they saw her themselves. No pulse, no decay. Yet alive. The scientists agreed to conduct a series of controlled experiments to study her, understand her, maybe even cure her. But as they prepared the instruments, Eliza began to hum, low, trembling and childlike. And when the lights flickered again, every candle in the room went out at once. In the darkness, her voice echoed, "He's still here." And then something in the far corner moved. The séance at St. Bartholomew's, the moment the candles went out, the room filled with silence, the kind that presses on your chest and makes every breath feel heavy. Dr. Wilcox could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Somewhere in the dark, Eliza's voice whispered, "He's still here." Then 2 footsteps, slow, dragging, uneven. When the lights finally flared back to life, there was no one else in the room. Eliza was still lying on the bed, eyes open, staring straight ahead, and yet the metal tray beside her had slid 2 inches across the table. The nurses refused to return. The other doctors wanted to end the study altogether. But Wilcox, he couldn't stop. He needed answers. That night, one of his colleagues, Dr. Samuel Prentice, a man known more for his belief in spiritualism than science, made a dangerous suggestion. "If she's trapped between life and death," Prentice said, "then perhaps her soul is too. Let us ask her. What holds her there?" Wilcox laughed at first. A séance inside St. Bartholomew's. It was madness. But by the 3rd sleepless night, with Eliza muttering to unseen figures in her room, madness started to sound like reason, so they prepared it. A circle of candles. A table draped in black cloth. Eliza's bed placed at the center of the room. 3 doctors, 1 patient, and a single question none of them really wanted answered. As the clock struck midnight, Dr. Prentice began the ritual. His voice trembled. "If there are any spirits among us, reveal yourselves." For a moment, nothing. Then Eliza's body began to shiver, lightly at first, then violently, as if something deep within her was fighting to stay inside. Her lips parted. Her voice, low, echoing, layered, filled the room. "You should not call him." Wilcox's stomach twisted. "Who, Eliza? Who are we calling?" "He made me," she said. "And he is not gone." The temperature in the room plummeted. Every candle flame drew inward, bending toward Eliza as if pulled by gravity. And then a voice, not hers, a man's voice, calm, cold. "You misunderstand my work, Henry." Wilcox staggered backward. "Who said that?" Prentice looked around wildly. No one moved their lips. Eliza's eyes rolled back, and the voice came again, from her mouth but not her. "Death is a disease. I found the cure. It was Vale. The doctors tried to end the seance, but the candles wouldn't extinguish. The flames turned blue. Eliza's arms lifted from the bed, stiff and unnatural. The instruments on the tray began to rattle, then fly from the table one by one. Wilcox shouted, "Stop this! You're killing her!" But the voice only laughed. She was never alive to begin with. A sudden crack. Glass shattered. Every window in the room blew open at once. Then silence. When the men dared to look again, Eliza was still, motionless, but on her forearm, faint and fresh, were letters burned into the skin, letters that spelled a single word: below. Wilcox stared at the mark. Trembling, below. Did it mean beneath the hospital? Beneath London? Or beneath something far darker? He didn't know it yet, but that word would lead him straight to the hidden laboratory of Dr. Erasmus Vale. The forbidden machine, Doctor. Henry Wilcox couldn't get that word out of his mind. Below. It haunted every waking hour, every corridor he walked, every echo in the old hospital's basement. He'd seen strange things in medicine, bodies twitching after death, muscles firing from nerves that refused to quit. But this was different. This was deliberate. For days, Wilcox combed through the hospital's restricted archives, following scraps of old building plans and abandoned case files. And then he found it, an entry from 1864, signed by Erasmus Vale himself. Construction approved for additional storage beneath Ward C, to house preservation equipment and cadaver tanks. Preservation equipment. That was his clue. Late one fog-choked evening, Wilcox descended the narrow stairwell that led below Ward C. The air was heavy, metallic. The deeper he went, the colder it became. He carried a lantern in one hand and Vale's journal in the other. When he reached the final step, he saw it, a rusted iron door, half buried behind bricks. Someone had sealed it decades ago. The word "below" was scrawled faintly across the stone in red. He pried it open with a crowbar. The sound echoed like a scream through the tunnels. Beyond it lay a chamber, vast, silent, and filled with machines that didn't belong to 1879. Glass tanks lined the walls, each one filled with cloudy liquid. Inside, bodies. Some were barely formed. Others were disturbingly lifelike, but none of them were alive. And yet, none were decayed. They looked frozen in time. Wilcox's light flickered. His heart pounded. In the center of the room stood a massive copper structure shaped like an arch, its wires running into the tanks. A plaque at its base read, "The Reanimation Engine, E. Vale, 1863. He opened the control box. Inside were old dials, mercury switches, and glass tubes still filled with liquid metal. It looked like something between a generator and a torture device. And then, in the silence, he heard a whisper. "You found it." He spun around. No one was there. The voice came again, this time from behind him, echoing through the metal walls. "You wanted to understand, didn't you, Henry?" The lantern dimmed. A shape flickered in the reflection of the tank. A man's silhouette, tall, wearing a long coat. Vale. "You call me a monster," the voice said. "But I only gave them what they begged for, another chance." Wilcox shook his head. "You trapped them. You didn't preserve life. You imprisoned it." "Life," Vale replied coldly, "is nothing but the right current in the right body. And Eliza is proof it worked." Suddenly the machine began to hum, though no power touched it. Sparks of blue light danced across the copper frame. The tanks started to vibrate. Inside them, the bodies moved. Their hands pressed against the glass. Their eyes rolled open, all at once. Wilcox stumbled backward. The air smelled of ozone and rot. The hum grew into a deafening roar. He turned to run, but a blinding flash threw him to the ground. When he looked up, the room was silent again. The machine had stopped, but now one of the tanks was empty. And back in the hospital above the ground, Eliza Merriweather's bed was empty too. The reanimation chamber. When Dr. Henry Wilcox climbed back up from the tunnels beneath St. Bartholomew's, the world above felt wrong. The hospital halls were quiet. Too quiet. Every lamp flickered. Every shadow looked alive. He rushed toward Eliza's ward, but her bed was empty. The straps that had held her wrists were torn, and her pillow was soaked with a strange silvery residue. He called for the night nurse. No one answered. Then he saw them, footprints faint and wet, leading out of the room and down the corridor. Bare feet, small, female, Eliza, he whispered. He followed the trail past the surgical wing, down into the disused east hallway, the oldest part of the hospital. The doors down there hadn't been opened in decades, but now one of them stood ajar. Inside was a room Wilcox had never seen before, a stone chamber with medical instruments older than he'd ever used. And on the far wall, etched deep into the brick, the symbol EV, Erasmus Vale's initials. Wilcox's lantern shook in his hand. The air buzzed faintly like static. And then that same low hum, the sound he'd heard in the tunnels. He turned the corner, and what he saw stopped him cold. In the center of the room stood Eliza Merriweather, alive, awake. Her eyes glowed faintly in the half-light. Not bright, not natural, but shimmering like mercury. "Eliza," Wilcox said gently, "you need to come with me." "It's over." She tilted her head. "It's never over," she whispered. Her voice was layered, two tones at once, her own, and another deeper one beneath it. Vale's voice, the humming, grew louder. The floor trembled. Behind her, an old switchboard flickered to life, glowing blue. The copper coils on the walls vibrated, as if something invisible was moving through them. "He never stopped the machine," she said. "It runs beneath us. Always." Wilcox stared at her in horror. "Vale's dead, Eliza. His work ended years ago." She turned, her face blank. "He's not dead. He's in us." Suddenly the machines around her surged to life. Blue arcs of electricity leapt from wire to wire, forming a web of light. The air turned thick with heat and the smell of burning metal. Wilcox shielded his face as one of the tanks behind her cracked, spilling fluid across the floor. Inside it another body shifted, identical to Eliza. Then another tank moved. And another, each one held a copy. Same age, same face, same scars. 12 of them, the missing 12 from Vale's journal. Wilcox's knees weakened. "Oh my God!" Eliza stepped forward. He said death was the cage. He just opened the door. One by one, the other bodies began to twitch. Fingers scraped against glass. Eyes rolled open, milky, searching. The room filled with a sound that didn't belong to humans. The sound of 13 throats gasping at once. Wilcox stumbled backward, tripping over the cables. "Eliza, you have to fight it. You're still human." She looked at him. For just a moment, something in her expression flickered. A tear, a trace of fear. "I was," she said softly, until he finished the experiment, and with that, every light in the hospital went out. When power finally returned at dawn, the reanimation chamber was empty. Every tank shattered, every body gone. Only one thing remained, carved into the wall, glowing faintly in the cold light: experiment complete. The truth that science buried. For more than a century, the events at St. Bartholomew's Hospital were dismissed as myth. The official records say Dr. Henry Wilcox vanished. Eliza Merriweather's name was erased from the ledgers, and the East Wing, where the reanimation chamber stood, was quietly sealed shut. But in 2019, a restoration team stumbled upon something buried behind one of those walls, a metal box. Lined with lead, stamped with the initials EV inside, were Wilcox's handwritten notes, and a small vial of silvery fluid that seemed to move on its own. The discovery was sent to a private lab in Cambridge, and what scientists found inside that vial would rewrite everything we thought we knew about life and death. According to the analysis, the fluid wasn't mercury, and it wasn't any biological substance known to man. It was nanostructured metal, capable of storing electrical charge, and somehow replicating living tissue on a cellular level. But here's the impossible part. The metal was dated to the 19th century. No known technology from that era could have produced it. The researchers called it the Vale compound, and its behavior was unnatural. When exposed to warmth, it pulsed. When given a mild electrical current, it moved. And in one chilling test, the compound began forming cellular structures, identical to human blood. That's when they realized Erasmus Vale wasn't just experimenting with electricity. He had created the world's first synthetic organism, a living system powered by both biology and current. Eliza Merriweather wasn't resurrected. She was rewired. Wilcox's final notes, written in trembling ink, described what happened the night he disappeared. He wrote that Eliza had become a host for Vale's consciousness, that the compound didn't just restore tissue, it preserved memory. In his words, he found a way to live inside the current. And he lives still, wherever the hum persists, the hum that Wilcox mentioned. Acoustic researchers visiting the hospital in 2020 picked it up, a constant low frequency under 18 hertz coming from beneath the sealed east wing. Too low for human ears, but enough to trigger unease and hallucinations in those who stayed too long. One member of the team described hearing whispers. Another claimed she saw a woman standing in the corner of the dark corridor, pale, silent, watching. When the footage from that night was reviewed, every camera flickered, except one. And for exactly 6 seconds a face appeared in the static. Not Eliza's, Erasmus Vale's. Today, the box that contained the compound is held in a secure vault under the British Museum. The liquid remains active, still moving, still responding to electrical pulses. No one knows why, no one knows how. But according to Wilcox's last written line, found smeared with the same silvery residue, the experiment was never meant to end. He said death was a system error, and he found the code to fix it. If you listen closely, they say, you can still hear it, that faint, rhythmic hum beneath the hospital floors. Some say it's the generators. Others say it's him still running the machine, waiting for someone to switch it on again.